It started on a Sunday morning. The kind that feels quieter than it should. Rain tapping against the window, gray light creeping through the blinds, and Ethan waking to the faint buzz of his phone on the nightstand. He reached for it, still half asleep, expecting the usual, a message, a notification, something ordinary. But it wasn't that. It was a recording. A new audio file he didn't remember making. 3 minutes and 16 seconds long. The timestamp showed 3:11 a.m. when he was deep asleep. He frowned, thumb hovering over the play icon. The room was still, the air thick. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured. He pressed play. A soft hiss filled the speakers. The quiet sound of his own breathing. Sheets rustling. A faint clock ticking. Then another noise. A whisper. Too soft to make out at first, like someone speaking from across the room. Ethan turned the volume up. There it was again, clearer this time, close to the microphone. A voice. It wasn't his. It said his name. Slowly. Almost tenderly. Ethan. He froze. His chest tightened as if the air had been pulled out of the room. The voice wasn't threatening. It was calm, deliberate, intimate. The kind of tone someone uses when they already know you. He replayed it again and again. The whisper came at the same moment each time. Then silence. Then a faint, rhythmic sound, like footsteps moving through carpet. He stared at the waveform on his screen, following every rise and dip, his pulse matching the pattern. He checked the room empty. The window was closed, curtains still drawn. He lived alone. The apartment was small enough to see every corner without moving. Still he got up, looked under the bed, up in the closet. Nothing. When he sat back down, the recording had reached the final few seconds. The breathing had stopped. There was only static, the kind that flickers when a microphone picks up movement. Then one final whisper, low and deliberate, right next to the mic. "Don't look at the window." Ethan froze. His eyes flicked toward the glass without meaning to. The rain slid down in crooked lines, reflecting the dim orange of the streetlight outside. He thought he saw something move, a flicker, a darker shadow within the reflection, but when he blinked, it was gone. He locked the phone, tossed it aside, and stood still for a long moment. Every sound in the apartment seemed amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft rattle of pipes, the rain. He told himself it was a glitch, a sleep app misfiring, or some kind of background interference. Logical. Ordinary. But when he checked the file details again, something didn't fit. The metadata showed manual activation. Someone had pressed record. At 3:11 a.m., his stomach sank. He remembered waking once that night, just briefly, because of a noise near the foot of his bed. He'd thought it was thunder. He didn't open his eyes. Didn't move. Just drifted back to sleep. Now, sitting in the faint light of morning, he wondered if that was the moment the recording began. He pressed play one last time, forcing himself to listen until the end. The whisper echoed again, "Don't look at the window." The screen dimmed as the file finished, the silence after it almost louder than the sound itself. Ethan stared at the darkened screen, heart still pounding, until a small icon caught his eye. The phone's camera light had flickered on, at the exact same moment the whisper was heard. He didn't remember turning it on. And just before he set the phone down, a new file appeared beneath the first one. Untitled. Timestamp 3:12 a.m. He hadn't pressed record that time either. Ethan didn't open the new file right away. It just sat there beneath the first one. Untitled, timestamped a minute later, like a silent dare. The longer he looked at it, the colder the air in the room seemed to get. Eventually he hit play. The recording began almost identically to the first. His breathing. The faint patter of rain. The occasional creak of floorboards. But then, something new. A faint click, like a door latch. And after that, footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. Ethan's pulse quickened. He turned up the volume, straining to separate sound from static. The steps moved around his bed, circling. At one point, the microphone picked up a sound like fabric brushing against wood. Then, a low exhale, close enough to fog the mic. He felt sick. He remembered waking briefly around that time, a feeling that someone had been standing near the foot of his bed. He'd told himself it was a dream. Now the recording proved otherwise. He switched on the lamp beside him, bathing the room in soft amber light. Everything looked still, harmless. But the recording continued, faint, distorted whispers bleeding through the hiss. The words were unintelligible, but the tone wasn't random. It sounded like two people talking. One whispering, the other answering. His own voice. Ethan leaned closer. He could hear himself mumbling in his sleep, replies to whatever unseen voice was speaking to him. Then the whispers stopped. A long, dead silence filled the speakers. He could hear his heart pounding in the background of the recording, steady but heavy. Then came a sharp pop of static. And a flicker. The sound shifted, as if the phone had been picked up. Something scraped against the mic. Then came the faint mechanical click of the camera turning on. Ethan froze. He hadn't opened the camera app in weeks. He replayed that section 3 times. The same sound. The same timing. 3:13 a.m., 2 minutes after the first recording ended. The phone had activated its own light. For the first time, Ethan felt genuine fear crawl through him. Not confusion, not curiosity, fear. He stood and checked the door. But windows sealed. No signs of anyone breaking in. Still, the hairs on his arms lifted as though something unseen was watching him. He replayed the final seconds again, just to be sure. This time, after the click, there was another sound. A door creaking open. Not his bedroom door. The closet. Ethan turned toward it slowly. The door stood closed, motionless in the dim light. He stepped forward, his throat dry, hand trembling as he reached for the knob. The wood felt cold under his fingertips. He hesitated, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the building and the whisper of rain outside. He opened it anyway. Empty. He exhaled, half laughing at himself, the tension breaking for only a moment. Then his phone buzzed in his hand. Another new file had appeared. The recording he'd just played had somehow duplicated itself. Same name. Same length. Different timestamp. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the time. 3:11 a.m. The exact moment the first one was made. And when he pressed play again, the footsteps started from the beginning. Only this time, there was a faint whisper layered behind them. A voice repeating over and over, "I'm not outside." Ethan didn't sleep the rest of that night. He sat at his desk, the phone's glow painting his face in blue. The whisper, "I'm not outside," looped endlessly in his mind. Each replay revealed something new, faint echoes beneath the words, distortions that shouldn't have been there. By morning, exhaustion blurred his thoughts. He uploaded the audio to an online forum for sound analysis, a small community of night owl technicians who dissected strange recordings. He didn't explain much, just wrote, "Unusual background noise, can someone identify it?" Within minutes, replies started appearing. Most were jokes or bots. But one message stood out. A user named Spectral Trace wrote, "You've got a data gap. 2 minutes of sound replaced with frequency distortion. That's not interference, it's editing." Ethan blinked. Editing? He hadn't touched the file. He asked how that could happen automatically. The user responded almost instantly. "It can't. Someone removed part of your audio manually. Check the waveform. You'll see the break." He downloaded a free editing app, imported the file, and there it was, a flat, silent section between 1:02 and 3:02. Exactly 2 minutes. The gap was perfectly clean, too smooth to be a glitch. The more he zoomed in, the stranger it got. At the edges of the silence, faint noise bled through, a high, warbling tone, like someone humming just beyond hearing range. He increased the gain. The hum became clearer. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, almost melodic, and underneath it, a whisper surfaced. His name. Finn. Ethan's chest tightened. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't type. The silence in his apartment felt heavy now, pressing against the walls. He looked toward the window, remembering the first whisper, "Don't look at the window." He did anyway. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street below glistened under the pale daylight. Nothing moved. No one stood there. But a faint reflection shimmered against the glass, his own face, hollow-eyed, staring back. He turned away and shut the curtains. Another message notification appeared. Spectral trace again. That missing section, it starts exactly when the whisper says your name. Whoever cut it didn't want you to hear what came next. Ethan's stomach turned. He asked how they could know that. No reply. The user had gone offline. Their profile vanished minutes later. He replayed the file, focusing on the start of the gap. Right before the silence hit, there was a single noise, a mechanical click, followed by a breath drawn close to the mic. Then, nothing. He checked his phone settings. Every log from 3:11 a.m. onward was gone. The entire hour had been erased from its system history. Ethan sat frozen, the screen's light reflecting off his trembling hands. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed something. His phone's recording app had reopened itself. A new file was being created in real time. Location tag, kitchen. Time, 3:14 a.m. The new recording was still running. Ethan stared at the screen, pulse hammering in his ears. The app's timer blinked red, 00:01:26. 00:01:27. He hadn't moved. The phone sat across the room on his desk, yet the location tag showed it was recording from the kitchen. He rose slowly, every sound in the apartment amplified, the floor creaking beneath his feet, the faint hum of the fridge, his breath catching. The kitchen light was off. Only the soft blue from the phone screen lit the doorway. He could see it resting on the counter, camera aimed toward the dark. He hit stop and played it back. Footsteps again, not his this time, heavier, uneven. Then a scraping noise, metal against tile. The pause. And a voice, faint but clear. He doesn't remember. Ethan nearly dropped the phone. The voice was male, older, trembling like it came from someone right beside the mic. He checked every corner of the kitchen, every cabinet. Nothing. Just silence and his own reflection in the darkened window. By morning, exhaustion had melted into paranoia. He couldn't tell what scared him more, the thought of someone inside his apartment, or the idea that no one was. When he left for work, the woman from across the hall was already in the corridor. Mid-40s, quiet, always polite. She gave him a careful look. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been up late. I heard talking." Ethan's throat tightened. "You heard that?" She nodded slowly. "Through the wall. Last night. And the night before." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "You live in 3B, right?" He nodded. Her expression changed, something like recognition mixed with fear. "I used to live there," she said. "Years ago." Ethan blinked. "You, what?" She gave a nervous laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Did the floor creak near the bed? It always did that. Especially when the recording started. The words made his skin crawl. "What recording?" "The one that happens at night," she whispered. "Mine started the same way. Random files. Whispers. I thought it was a prank. Until," she stopped, eyes darting toward his door. "Until the voice started using my name." Ethan stared at her, every muscle in his body tense. "What did you do?" "I moved out." Her voice cracked. "But before I left, I found something. Under the floorboards. Near the bed. That's where it hides." He frowned. "What hides?" She stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "It starts with a voice. It ends when it answers you." A chill rolled through him. "Answers me how?" Her eyes glistened, desperate, pleading. "Don't find out." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hall until the door at the end clicked shut. Ethan stood frozen for a long time. Then, unable to stop himself, he unlocked his door and walked inside. The apartment felt colder than before. The shadows stretched longer across the floor. He walked into the bedroom. The same floorboard near his bed gave a soft groan beneath his foot. He knelt, pressed his fingers to the seam, and felt something hollow beneath. The neighbor's last words replayed in his mind, "Under the floor." He grabbed a screwdriver from the drawer and wedged it between the boards. The wood lifted with a dry crack, releasing a puff of dust. Beneath it, something glinted faintly in the dark. Metal, small and old. A cassette recorder. Ethan stared at the object beneath the floor, an old cassette recorder, half buried in dust. The metal was tarnished, the buttons corroded with age. A small strip of masking tape clung to its side, the ink faded but still legible. 3B, Night 6. His pulse thudded in his throat. That was his apartment number. He hesitated before reaching in. The air from the open floor felt colder, as though it came from a deeper place than it should. When his fingers brushed the recorder's surface, static whispered through the silence, a faint electrical pop that made him pull back instinctively. He waited, breath held. Nothing moved. Finally, he lifted it out. The battery cover was gone, but the tape inside was intact, wound tightly. The label on it read, June 12, 1998. Ethan didn't even own a cassette player, but curiosity outweighed reason. He found an old Walkman in a thrift box he'd never unpacked after moving in. It took a few minutes of cleaning, a set of fresh batteries, and shaking hands to make it work. When the tape clicked into place, he pressed play. At first, only white noise. Then a faint, familiar pattern, breathing, shifting bedsheets, and the same subtle hum he'd heard in his own recordings. It was almost identical. A woman's voice came through, groggy and scared. "Who's there?" Ethan froze. The voice wasn't anyone he recognized. But what followed made his blood run cold. Another voice, low and whispering, replied, "You left the window open again." The sound distorted, stretching into static, then the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps crossing wood. The woman screamed, a short, cut-off sound. Then silence. Ethan's hand shook as he stopped the tape. His heart hammered so hard it hurt. He rewound the recording and played it again, trying to convince himself he'd misheard. But no, the voice was clear, calm, deliberate. "You left the window open again." He set the recorder down carefully, staring at the floor where he'd found it. The neighbor's warning replayed in his mind. It starts with a voice. It ends when it answers you. Ethan glanced toward the window. The curtains hung motionless, though the faint reflection of the streetlight shimmered across the glass. He wanted to believe this was all coincidence, that the woman in the tape was the previous tenant, that whatever haunted her ended years ago. But then, beneath the soft hiss of the recorder, he heard something else. A second voice. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably his own. He stopped breathing. Boom. Played again. The whisper came just before the scream, layered under the static. His own voice saying one word, "Don't." Ethan stumbled back, nearly tripping over the loose board. He tore the tape from the recorder, hands trembling, and stared at it as though it could answer him. How could his voice be on a tape from 1998? A sudden creak broke through his thoughts, the sound of wood shifting somewhere behind him. Turned. The closet door had opened an inch. He approached it slowly, every instinct screaming to run. Inside, darkness. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. He shined his phone's light along the floor. Nothing. Then, as he turned to close the door, his phone vibrated violently in his hand. A new notification. Audio file saved. He hadn't recorded anything. The title glowed on the screen, Night 7. Beneath it, the timestamp read 3:11 m, hours before he'd even woken up. And in the background of the saved thumbnail image, barely visible, was the reflection of a man standing behind him, staring at the floorboards. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faint figure reflected behind him in the phone's thumbnail, the blurred outline of a man standing exactly where he'd been moments before. By morning, the image had burned itself into his mind. He needed answers, something logical, measurable, explainable. So he did what he always did when fear outweighed reason. He looked for proof. He transferred the audio files to his laptop and searched for a local sound engineer. One name stood out, a technician who specialized in restoring damaged recordings. Ethan called, explained it was for an old family tape. The man agreed to meet that afternoon. The workshop was small, filled with old speakers and tangled cords. The air smelled of dust and solder. The technician, a thin man in his 50s with deep-set eyes, took the files without a word. He played the first one, eyes narrowing as the whisper filled the room. When the phrase, "Don't look at the window," came through, he paused, replayed it, then adjusted the equalizer. Strange, he murmured. Two distinct voices. But they share the same frequency pattern. Ethan frowned. Meaning what? The man leaned closer to the monitor. Meaning it's the same person speaking twice. Ethan's stomach tightened. You mean like an echo? The technician shook his head. Not an echo. One voice is you, the other mimics yours at a lower pitch. Think of it like a perfect imitation layered under your own. Ethan stared at him. That's not possible. The man didn't respond. He opened the file from the cassette tape, the one labeled June 12, 1998. As the hiss began, the whisper came again. You left the window open again. The technician froze. Where did you get this? Ethan hesitated. It was under my floorboards. The man's hand trembled slightly on the keyboard. This tape, it was recorded with equipment that hasn't existed for 20 years. But the frequency range matches the one from your modern phone. Exactly. Ethan felt his pulse climb. So they're the same voice? He nodded slowly. Just down to the microsecond pitch variation. The silence stretched. Ethan could hear the faint hum of the speakers, the low buzz of an overhead light. The technician leaned back, face pale. Whatever's speaking in these recordings, it's copying you. It's been copying you for a long time. Ethan's throat went dry. You're saying it's me? The man closed the laptop abruptly. I'm saying you should stop recording. Burn the tapes. And whatever you do, don't listen to them again. Ethan tried to ask why, but the technician was already standing, unplugging cables with shaking hands. Please leave, he said quietly. I don't want this here. Outside, the afternoon sky hung heavy and gray. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, the city noise distant, muted. He pulled out his phone, meaning to delete every file. But as he unlocked it, the speaker buzzed softly, a faint voice bleeding through static. His own. Whispering, "You're not supposed to be here yet." The screen flickered, and a new file appeared automatically. Ethan didn't remember recording anything called The Forgotten Night. But there it was, time-stamped just 2 weeks after he moved into the apartment. His thumb hovered over the file, the chill of the technician's words still echoing in his head. It's been copying you for a long time. He hesitated, then pressed play. The sound began softly, rain against glass, distant traffic, the low hum of his ceiling fan. For a moment, it felt normal. Then came the breathing. Not steady, not calm. Shallow, panicked breaths, like someone trying not to make noise. He heard his own voice whisper, "Don't move. It's still outside." A scraping noise followed, something dragging across the floorboards. Ethan's stomach twisted. He didn't remember any of this. He paused the recording, heart hammering. The timestamp was 3:13 a.m. The same hour all his other recordings had started. He replayed the moment. The scraping came again, then a door creaked open. A faint voice, trembling, unfamiliar, whispered back, "You said it wouldn't come in this time." Ethan froze. That wasn't his voice. It was a woman's. The same one from the cassette. He turned the volume up, leaning closer to the phone. The audio shifted suddenly, muffled movement, footsteps, a thud. Then, faintly, the woman crying. "Please, don't make me go down there again." Ethan's pulse spiked. He scrubbed through the audio, stopping when he heard his name. "Ethan, it remembers you." The voice was faint, almost drowned in static, but it was unmistakable. She said his name before he'd ever heard her voice. Before he'd even lived here. He backed away from the desk, panic rising in his chest. His mind fought to reason with what he was hearing. Maybe the name wasn't his, maybe it was someone else, maybe. Then the recording changed tone. The hiss faded, and a new sound emerged, his own voice again, closer, clearer, whispering into the microphone, "Don't forget the basement." Ethan's breath caught. His building didn't have a basement, at least, not one he knew of. He paused the file, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. Every sound, the flickering light, the hum of the old radiator, seemed amplified. His shoes creaked on the wooden floor as he followed the faint draft toward the back of the apartment. Behind the pantry door, a section of the wall looked uneven. He ran his hand along the baseboard until he felt a small indentation, a latch hidden under years of paint. It clicked. The panel shifted slightly outward, revealing a narrow opening that led downward. A cold breath of air rose from below, carrying the faint smell of earth and metal. Ethan aimed his flashlight inside. Wooden steps descended into darkness. He hesitated, phone still in his other hand. The recording continued to play softly, his voice whispering again, "You promised not to remember." The words echoed through the narrow space as if the walls themselves repeated them. Ethan took a trembling step down, the beam of light catching something glinting on the dirt floor below. Something metallic, half-buried and familiar. A recorder. Just like the one he'd found under his floorboards. But this one had a new label on it, scrawled in fresh ink. The air in the hidden stairwell grew colder with each step. Ethan's flashlight trembled in his grip, the beam slicing through dust and darkness. The narrow walls pressed in close, coated with years of decay. At the bottom, the steps ended at a rusted metal door. It was barely 5 feet high, too small for anyone to enter without bending. Scratched across its surface, in uneven letters, was one word, window. Ethan hesitated. The door handle was ice cold, wet with condensation. He could hear faint movement beyond it, a slow, dragging sound, followed by a soft tap. Like fingers brushing glass. He swallowed hard and pushed. The door groaned open. Inside was a small concrete room. One single bulb flickered from a cord, casting light across damp walls covered in peeling paint. And on the far side of the room stood an old, wooden window frame, but it wasn't set into the wall. It stood alone, propped upright on the floor like a mirror. Its glass was black. Ethan stepped closer, each footstep echoing. The air felt heavy, humming with a low, electrical vibration. As he approached, the surface of the glass shifted, a faint reflection emerging in the dark pane. His own face, but not quite. The reflection blinked slower. Its expression lagged behind his movements, eyes hollow, mouth parted slightly as if about to speak. Ethan whispered, "Who are you?" The reflection smiled faintly. Then the sound returned, his voice, whispering from nowhere and everywhere at once, "You know who I am." The bulb above him flickered violently. The reflection began to move even when he didn't. Its lips formed words he didn't speak. "You left the window open again." Ethan staggered back, the recorder in his pocket suddenly clicking on by itself. A faint hum filled the room, the same one from his phone's nightly recordings. The same breathing pattern. He glanced down. The screen of his phone lit up without him touching it. A new file began to save. Night 8, the window. The recording played automatically. Static, then his own voice. "Don't look at it too long." His flashlight flickered, dying to a dim glow. The reflection tilted its head, watching him. Behind it, in the blackness of the glass, something shifted. A figure. The same silhouette he'd seen that first night, standing in the reflection of his room. It stepped closer within the pane, its shape clearer now, shoulders, face, the outline of a man. Ethan's voice on the recording grew louder, distorted. "If you see me there, it's already too late." The bulb burst overhead. The room plunged into darkness. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, the sound of breathing again, but not his. It came from behind him. Slow. He spun around, flashlight shaking back to life. The room was empty. The window frame stood alone, untouched. Except, the reflection was still there. But this time, it wasn't moving at all. It was frozen mid-breath, like a paused image of himself. And in the top corner of the glass, faintly etched, were the words, "Do not close it." Ethan stared, the hum in his ears rising to a high, piercing tone. Somewhere upstairs, his phone buzzed again. The buzzing from upstairs wouldn't stop. Ethan climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking like a whispered warning. His flashlight beam trembled over the peeling walls. The house seemed smaller now, pressing in on him, as if the air itself remembered what he'd seen below. When he reached his living room, his phone lay face down on the table, the screen pulsing faintly with light. A new file waited there. Night 9, the final playback. He didn't touch it at first. Just stared. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the windows fogged and silent. In the distance, thunder rolled like something shifting in its sleep. Finally he pressed play. Static. Then breathing, slow, heavy, rhythmic. It was his breathing. He listened, every muscle tense. The sound of footsteps followed, crossing wood, stopping near a window. Then came his voice, quiet, uneasy. "Why are you recording again?" Another voice answered, softer, lower, like it came from deep inside the mic. "You never stopped." Ethan froze. He recognized it. His own voice again, but older, distorted, filled with something hollow. He spoke into the dark, almost reflexively. "What do you want from me?" The voice from the phone replied before the thought even finished forming. "You wanted to remember." The room felt colder. Ethan's breath fogged in front of him. His reflection in the dark window stared back, faint and motionless. The phone crackled, the audio deepening. A sound like footsteps behind the mic, the faint rustle of fabric, the click of a door opening. Then the whisper came, "Turn around." He did. No one was there. But the shadow on the wall didn't match his own. It lingered a moment longer than it should, shoulders rising and falling out of sync with his breath. The voice continued, now layered, 2, 3 versions of himself overlapping in static. It was never outside the window, Ethan. It was inside the recording. The phone screen glitched, splitting into mirrored fragments. For a heartbeat, the reflection of his face appeared on the display, but his lips were moving independently of him, whispering something too faint to catch. Ethan lowered the volume, but the whisper grew louder. It wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was coming from the walls, the floor, the air itself, thousands of overlapping echoes of his own voice. "You left it open. You let it in." He stumbled back, covering his ears. The lights flickered wildly, every bulb straining against the dark. The recording still played, growing sharper, clearer. And then, silence. Only one voice remained. "Cold. Look." Ethan turned toward the window. The reflection stared back. Only now, it wasn't a mirror image. The man inside the glass was moving toward him, his movements reversed, eyes black like the glass itself. Ethan tried to look away, but his body refused to obey. The reflection raised a hand. His own hand followed. Perfectly synced. Then the reflection smiled. The phone in his hand buzzed again. On the screen, the audio waveform pulsed once more, recording in real time. The title changed automatically. Night 10, New Session. The reflection pressed its palm to the glass. Ethan's own hand met it instinctively. A flash of static. The lights died. When they came back, the window was empty. Only the faint outline of a handprint remained. Ethan was gone. The phone on the table continued to hum, recording nothing but quiet air. Slowly, it saved the file and renamed it once more. Audio saved, Night 1. And somewhere, deep inside the black screen, a faint reflection blinked awake, just as the breathing started again.